exploring the impact of the Seljuk Turks on Europe during World War II. Although the Seljuk Turks had vanished from the political world centuries before the outbreak of World War II, their legacy rippled quietly beneath the surface of European geopolitical landscapes. The Seljuks, who once controlled vast regions of the Islamic world, including much of Anatolia, Persia, and the Levant, were long gone by the time Hitler marched across Poland or Churchill rallied the British nation. Yet history is never truly dead. It lingers in the bones of nations, in the echoes of empires, and in the ideological shadows that shape how cultures perceive one another. In the build-up to World War II, particularly in the fractured lands of the Middle East and southeastern Europe, the ancient Seljuk past loomed like a ghost, invoked in propaganda, remembered in scholarly circles, and twisted by fascist and nationalist movements seeking legitimacy through antiquity. As the Nazi regime expanded its reach, its ideologues became obsessed with historical parallels. Just as the Seljuks had once penetrated deep into Byzantine territory, disrupting the Christian balance of power and initiating the Crusades, so too did Germany aim to reconfigure Europe's religious and ethnic structure. Strangely, in obscure corners of Nazi academia, there were attempts to reinterpret the Seljuks not as Muslim invaders, but as noble Indo-European warriors, a notion rooted in the racial pseudoscience of the time. This was particularly evident in Nazi collaborations with Turkish ultra-nationalists and pan-Turanists who saw in the Seljuk past a heroic lineage that might bind modern Turkey to ancient glory. Though Turkey remained neutral for most of the war, the ideological flirtation between certain Turkish intellectuals and Nazi agents suggests that the Seljuk name still held rhetorical power. In contrast, Allied powers occasionally weaponized the image of the Seljuks as a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happened when Europe failed to unite against external threats. In British and French wartime literature, the Battle of Manzikert, 1071, where the Seljuks shattered Byzantine power in Anatolia, was revived symbolically to highlight the consequences of divided alliances. In Eastern Europe, particularly in Bulgaria and parts of Yugoslavia, nationalist movements evoked memories of Seljuk incursions to stir fear of Turkish resurgence, despite the fact that modern Turkey had little interest in Balkan politics during the 1940s. But beyond propaganda and ideology, there were subtler, more academic channels through which the Seljuk influence persisted. European Orientalists, particularly those in France and Germany, had studied Seljuk art, architecture, and governance for decades before World War II. When these scholars were co-opted by wartime propaganda ministries, elements of Seljuk symbolism bled into visual culture. For example, stylized Seljuk motifs appeared in wartime posters about East-West dichotomies. The Seljuk emphasis on celestial geometry and order was contrasted with the chaos of Bolshevism in certain fascist pamphlets, though such usage distorted historical truth for ideological gain. In occupied territories like Greece, where memories of Ottoman, and by extension Seljuk, rule still lingered, resistance propaganda often painted fascist powers as modern versions of the old Turkic threat. While the Seljuks themselves were not responsible for Ottoman policies, their name was used interchangeably in peasant narratives, blending the two empires into one mythic other. This folk memory shaped how civilians interpreted fascist occupation, particularly in rural Orthodox communities, where sermons would reference ancient invasions to foster resilience. On the scholarly side, German archaeologists during the war continued excavations in Anatolia, occasionally under the pretense of studying Aryan roots. Some Nazi archaeologists cited the Seljuk routes across Persia and Anatolia to trace what they claimed were ancient Indo-European migration paths, an academic sleight of hand used to justify their expansionist ideology. The irony, of course, was that the Seljuks were Turkic, not Aryan, a fact suppressed or reinterpreted depending on political needs. Meanwhile, in Istanbul and Ankara, Turkish thinkers debated how their Seljuk heritage might place them as a bridge between East and West in the post-war order. Though Turkey maintained a cautious neutrality until near the end of the war, internal debates reflected a growing awareness of historical identity. Pan-Turkist intellectuals published tracts glorifying the Seljuk conquest of Anatolia as proof of Turkish superiority and destiny. These texts, while not officially state-sanctioned, were quietly circulated among certain army circles and nationalists, suggesting that the war's ideological battles extended even into Turkey's self-perception. Some even speculated that if Germany had succeeded in defeating the Soviet Union, it might have